Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the September webinar of the P&G Alumni Network. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday. I'm very excited for the topic that we have here today. This is Andrew Tarvin, your webinar MC. But I'm excited for the topic because we're going to be talking about leading and engaging millennials, which is something that's near and dear to my heart because I'm technically a millennial. I'm on the elder millennial side, was born in '84, so I'm technically on that cusp depending on who you talk to, which is an interesting balance because I am, someone who remembers the days of dial-up internet and, your parents being on the phone and be like, I want to get on the internet, I need to connect, and you have the whatever on AOL and all that stuff. But so I remember life before the internet, but also grew up with it. Then there's also the younger millennials that all have internet have been internet their entire life. And so we're going to talk about how we can lead and engage those in the workplace, all the different dynamics of that. And Brad is on the line with us today, and he's going to be fantastic for that. Before we jump into that, we do have a couple of announcements, kind of the standard announcements for the webinar, just so you know what's going on. If you're not familiar with the webinar series, if this is your first one, it is a roughly monthly series that we do to connect members, provide insight, and more importantly, leverage the expertise that we have in the network. We know we have a lot of very talented, smart people in the alumni network that we want to benefit from learning from, and Brad is a great example of that. But the P&G Alumni Network is certainly larger than just this webinar series that we do. It's a nonprofit founded by former P&Gers with 35,000 plus members worldwide, a number of chapters. It's officially recognized and supported by Procter & Gamble. And it's all about creating connections, right? Allowing us to continue the network, because that's one thing that people always say about P&G is, what did you miss? What do you miss the most? And it's the people. It's like, oh, okay, well, the alumni network is a connection of those same people. So the connections are definitely a big focus, enrichment, getting us better, and then also philanthropy as well. So you can learn more about that on the P&G Alumni website, which we'll share a little bit later. As far as the webinar technology goes, a couple of things to kind of keep in mind is, one, you'll have a alumni webinar screen. This will be where you'll see slides. Hopefully you should see that right now. And you won't see any video though, just because of different internet connection speeds and the fact that we record this and all that. We don't do the webcam thing. It's just more of focus on the screen itself and our wonderful, beautiful voices. You will also notice that you have a panel on your right-hand side. In that panel, you'll notice that you are muted. That is so that we prevent any of the background noise that might be coming along as coworkers come up and bother you, or the dog is barking, or the UPS guy shows up, or whatever it happens to be. So you will be muted, but you still have the opportunity to ask questions. In your panel is a question section. Certainly feel free, as Brad is speaking, to share your questions as you go along. We'll capture those and have an opportunity for Q&A towards the end. But certainly feel free to ask those questions as the webinar is happening. So all of that being said, we have with us today Brad Casper, and he recently became the CEO of O Partners, and he's there to lead the company as it embarks on a transformational agenda that will see maybe it's OH, I should have asked that, Brad, more from the leading agency in Arizona to a nationally recognized leading independent marketing services powerhouse. Casper is no stranger to leadership and growth challenges. He worked at P&G from 1995 to 2001 and went through a variety of brand management and general management roles, both in Cincinnati, Japan, Hong Kong, China, and in global laundry. He served as president of Church Dwight in New Jersey. He was president of CEO of Dial Corporation in Scottsdale. He spent 5 years in that role. Then he embarked on an entrepreneurial path in private equity and professional sports, holding leadership roles in PE-backed companies, as well as the president of the Phoenix Suns and several public, private, and nonprofit board of director roles. Brad is married to a fellow former Cincinnatian, so hopefully he is on board the Cincinnati Skyline train, and has 3 adult children. He lives in Paradise Valley, Arizona. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. And so I am making you presenter now, so that should be popping up on your screen.
All right.
All right, we're able to see that, and we see your presentation, so you are good to go. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks, Drew. And good morning, good afternoon, and maybe in some cases, good evening to all of you. It's Good to be back in the P&G family fold today. As Drew said, this seminar or webinar is really about leading and engaging a millennial workforce. And I think it's pretty obvious that I'm not a millennial when you take a look at that old mug. But it's something that has become a subject that's near and dear to my heart, as you'll see in this webinar, as the company that I now lead as CEO is highly comprised of millennials, and we're finding that when we, basically motivate and incent them properly, great things can happen. But a little bit of context, first of all. As Drew said, I've had a little bit of a whirlwind career journey. I actually, before I got to Procter, I spent 2 years as a financial analyst in Cincinnati at the GE aircraft engine business, decided I didn't want to do that, went to Procter & Gamble and actually spent 16 and a half years there. As the bio indicated, a good portion of that was actually overseas. I had the pleasure of being in Kobe, Japan, and Hong Kong and mainland China, and then came back to a global role in like 1998. And so now I can actually say that I have been gone from P&G longer than I spent at P&G, and I spent 17 years leading these various brands that have populated the screen. And as Drew said, I am now the Chief Executive Officer of OH Partners, and some people do say O, as he did. It has nothing to do with a truncation of the abbreviation for the state of Ohio, although I kind of smile when people think that I named the company for that. In fact, it's named after two founders, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But it was a bit of a global journey. A native of Cincinnati, I moved to Kobe, Hong Kong, Dallas. I now reside outside of Scottsdale, Arizona, but I also ran companies in LA and Princeton, New Jersey. And what I wanted to ground everybody on, because I know the term millennial is used a lot, but even I at times struggled for trying to define this generation. And I happen to fall into the baby boomers. There's probably some other boomers on the line. There's probably some Gen X on the line. Millennials are often known as Gen Y. And as Drew set up, this generation was literally born during the technology revolution, where computers and tablets and the web became central to everyone's life. And right on their heels, now Gen Z is starting to graduate from universities around the world. And I happen to believe that there is more homogeneity among millennials and Gen Z than there probably even was among baby boomers. And so what I'm going to tell you a little bit about then are some of the issues, and I borrowed this fact from Korn Ferry, a recent publication of theirs, and some of you who are leading companies may be able to relate to this. I think it's absolutely stunning that 70% of workers say that they are not engaged in their jobs. Think about all the lost productivity and efficiencies and effectiveness that is caused by a lack of engagement. Statistically, and Korn Ferry ran this in 50 countries, 20% increase in employee stress over a 3-year period. And then conversely, if you can really intrinsically motivate and excite your workforce, 76% of employees who will exceed performance expectations. So, I didn't know all these facts when I came here as executive chairman 2.5 years ago. I first started as executive chairman in the spring of 2016. And I only became the CEO last month when my founders said, hey, listen, this is going so well. Why don't you see if you can scale the company even further? So with that, let me give you just a quick overview of OH Partners, because it's unlikely that you are familiar with our company brand yet, but I'd love to put into context just how important that millennial workforce is to us. So at a glance, this is a full service agency. It's a little bit of I know there's so many digital agencies being born and branding agencies. we like to think of ourselves as an end-to-end full service agency. So it has strategy, it has creative, it has media services. We created a subsidiary last year called Matter Films, which is basically an in-house content lab. As so many of you are familiar with social media, having our ability to create social media, not just on phones, but on red cameras, and being able to produce content for our clients that has great production values is critically important to our business proposition, which is really to be a rapid results agency. So many of you, like me at Proctor, would struggle with some of our agencies because it just seemed like it took too long to get results, and oftentimes those results weren't very clear. The agency itself was founded 10 years ago by my partners, and it's located in Phoenix, Arizona. And in fact, OH really goes back to the names of the two founders, Matt Owens and Scott Harkey. And in their first 8 years, as many entrepreneurs would do, I mean, they bootstrapped it. It started in a kitchen in a townhome, and then it moved into a small agency office. And I think as natural for agencies, there was some rapid growth, but it was oftentimes a little bit lumpy and erratic. And one of the consequences, I didn't realize this when I came from the client side into the agency, but the agency turnover averages about 30% per year. That's pretty high by Proctor standards, and probably by many of the standards that you would use in your own company. When I arrived at the beginning of 2016, at first as a consultant, I was analyzing their employee turnover, and the employee turnover was actually north of 40%, so it was even worse than the industry average. And we'll get into some of the factors that may have contributed to that. And it's not surprising, if your employee turnover is high, the client turnover can be high too. But a whole new chapter has unfolded for the agency, not just commensurate with my arrival in 2016, although I do think, and encouragingly, I want to let all P&Gers on the phone know that many of the things that we loved about P&G, that we learned from P&G, still apply, even in this millennial and Gen Z workforce. But it's how you package and sell those concepts that determine really the quality of the adoption and the takeoff. So when we rebranded the company as OH Partners, the blue square that's to the right of the screen, we actually painted this on the wall of our office. This actually looks like an ad that we run in some of the local press. And the words that are under it are actually quite meaningful, because they were all developed by our employees. The thing that I happen to like the most, because I think it starts to get at the essence of what the millennial worker is looking for, they used and coined the term daytime roommate. And I think all of us who watched the TV show Friends, and some of these young people are still streaming Friends on Netflix, know what it's like to be a daytime roommate. But in the past 2 years, we have driven breakthrough results. Our employee retention, or I should say, I guess, employee turnover is less than 5%. Client retention is at about 97%. And really, the secret has been we've unleashed the power of the millennials. And I know all Proctor people are results-oriented and scorecard and KPI-oriented. Well, we've quadrupled the size of the company in the last 2 years, going from about 30 employees to about 112. We've quadrupled the top and the top line, and 10x on the bottom line, and added 18 margin points on the bottom. So what we have today is a remarkably different company than the one that existed 2.5 years ago. And this is what is somewhat surprising. And I have to tell you, I came in here with some trepidation. As an old fart, would I be able to connect with these employees? 70% of them are millennial, 65% are female, and the executive leadership team is greater than 50% female. I wasn't really concerned about whether or not we could connect with females. I was really most concerned about whether or not my leadership styles and the things that had worked for me in other companies would apply here. This picture on the right-hand side is actually on the cover of Adweek magazine from May of 2017, when we did a little bit of a stunt with Airbnb to get their attention. I'm not going to get into that case study today, but this is just a small cross-section of the employees that were in the office that morning at about 5:30 a.m. after a 24-hour live stream broadcast that ended up with 43 million impressions around the world. But enough about that. Let's start getting into some of the things that I think have happened in the past 2.5 years. We are now the #1 agency in the state of Arizona, and you might say kind of under your breath, well, no great agencies have ever come out of Arizona, so that's not a big deal. But we're on our way, we think, to becoming a great agency. We have been recognized as the best place to work. We are being recognized in 2 days as one of the most admired companies in Arizona. And this little old Inc. 5000, we just moved up 1,000 places in the Inc. list, and for the 6th consecutive year, we've made that list of fastest growing companies. And we think that we've got at least a 7th and an 8th and a 9th year around the corner for us. So what I'd like to do is segue to the transformation process, which I hope there will be some nuggets in here, not knowing what types of companies you lead, whether it's small or large, that hopefully there will be a few things that you can transfer from this process to your own company. I guess I would say in hindsight, as I look at my own career journey, I went from really large multinational companies like GE and Procter & Gamble to much more smaller and more entrepreneurial. And the larger the company, is true that most of the population of those were older companies, and they were also much more mature workforces. And the predominance was baby boomers or older. And now we've got an environment of very youthful millennials. When we started re-examining how we work and how we are going to end that 40% or 50% employee turnover, it really began, and this word cloud really gives you an idea of the kinds of things that we were trying to find out from people about what would make a better company to work in. And so that literally came out of, and this is a lift from a survey. I know P&G used to do employee sat, dissat surveys. I'm sure of companies that you've been a part of. I just point out to you, take a look at the upper left-hand corner. These are actual results that we conducted in 2017, in April of 2017. This set of questions here, and there were probably about 33 in total, but these are often correlated with the types of questions and responses that will predict engagement. I'm determined to give my best effort at work every day. When I saw that number at 98%, and I'm inspired to meet my goals at 96% and 91%, I literally called the researcher and said, okay, is this like an April Fool's joke? Because I had never seen anything quite like it. You can also see the 2017 had very low disagree levels. Now, in 2018, you may say, well, Brad, what kind of happened there? Totally interesting. I know as proctoids, you would probably geek out on this data just as much as I did. I started thinking about the respondents in 2017. Our rapid growth meant that most of the employees, literally about 2/3 of the employees in 2017 had less than 1 year of service with the company. By 2018, I think the number dropped to about 25 or 30% being in the first year. And what I saw is anybody with 1 year or less of service, even in 2018, the results were almost identical to those in 2017. What you do is, I think the honeymoon effect of your company begins to set in the 2nd and 3rd year, and I think we all experience those ourselves as employees. But overall, these numbers certainly don't look at all like the 70% of people who said that they were disengaged in the Korn Ferry survey. This is a much higher level of engagement. And then really, if we get back to why were we able to turn the corner, we all know that P&G was incredible with its purpose and core values. We lived them, we breathed them, and I honestly wondered in this younger environment would it be important? But we learned a very, very important lesson, and one that I'd want to share with you. Instead of having a leadership team design the core values, we literally let a cross-section of younger employees, millennials, and maybe nobody higher than a mid-level manager, many of them with less than 3 years in the industry, try to help us define what our core values should be. They drew this infographic on the right, and they had rich descriptions of what integrity meant and what accountable meant in their own vernacular. So when we rolled it out, the adoption was so much easier and better. The survey results that we had done just around that same time also indicated that they do want strategy. They want to know where you're going. They want to know those goals, those aspirations, those endpoints. But the survey also said they do want work-life balance rather than, I think that old expression about work to live versus live to work. Many of us on this webcast are probably live to work people, and yet most of the people that are millennials today are much more about working to live, and they want to see how a company can fit into their lives. As you might expect, benefits and compensation are important, but we've heard about the millennials that it's not about the money. It's not as much about the money maybe as it was for some of the people who are baby boomers or even Gen X. And professional development, contrary to the opinion of many that millennials are job hoppers, we have found the opposite to be true, that they are really engaged in professional development. But we also know that this is the generation that got trophies for participation, for showing up in kindergarten and getting ribbons and just having accolades their entire lives. We have found that importance of recognition certainly continues in the corporate world. So again, some of the plays that we came up with in our playbook are often modeled after Procter & Gamble. Those of you who've ever read the book by Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of the Team, may remember that he talks about the importance of getting your organization together on a Monday morning, and we call it Monday morning magic. It's a 30-minute high-intensity discussion where people, contrary to the picture that you see them at an offsite meeting, we cram 110 people into a space that's probably more suited for 30 or 35. But it's a very energetic, almost like a lightning round every Monday of what happened last week and what's about to happen this week. We focus on successes, we focus on things that are important to everybody, but it really keeps the camaraderie and the collegiality, and we have a lot of fun. There's a lot of laughing and a lot of socializing. The quarterly offsite meetings are a way for us to really perpetuate this culture of transparency. Everybody in the company, regardless of age or level, sees the full P&L, the full balance sheet. They understand the concepts of gross profit and net income and retention, and they really appreciate it. This is, of course, a generation that wants to know what's in their food, the ingredients, the amount of organic content, and so it's not surprising to me that they approach business the same way. Tell me more. They'll be the ones to sift through the things that are important to them. Those of you who might remember what counts factors, I took the old P&G what counts factors, I dusted them off, I evolved them, and I literally replayed it for what I thought would be important in this modern company and this agency world. On the very first offsite meeting in April of 2016, I stood before people and I challenged them. I said, if you are here for a job, that's fine. We want you to be here for a career. And we encourage people who were just interested in jobs to go ahead and get off the bus now. And some people opted out. But now that we've focused on career development, that I think has had a profound impact on retention. I mentioned it a little bit before, but the bullet point at the bottom about lead from the middle. I think what we learned at Procter & Gamble was the importance of leaders leading at the top and setting the tone. And that remains important in this agency too. But I think we discovered that the real power is to allow the millennials to lead themselves. And so we formed a culture committee, and that culture committee plans a lot of events. We then formed an OH Cares, a philanthropic and charitable group. I'll get into that a little bit more lately. We even created a purpose team to help lead the purpose when they said that the core values were great, but that we still lacked this sense of what it is and what's our why. So we mobilized literally 75% of the employees are in one or more committees, or what I would call at this stage tribes. Like a lot of entrepreneurial companies, we do think that the environment is an important part of our brand equation. And so we moved into a new office in the same building. We took out all the ceiling panels, which you'll see in the lower left-hand photo. And those are the columns between the 19th and 20th floors of our building. And unlike at Procter & Gamble, we may have put our core values on a board and framed it and put it in a conference room or in the lobby. These kids said, no, let's paint our core values on the pillars and make it both a literal and figurative understanding of our company. Yeah, we have a nap pod, which gets used very infrequently. It looks like a dental chair, but the pod shroud kind of comes over you and it has noise canceling headphones. I think it gets used less than once a week, but the vibe of having it there and telling people it's okay to chill for 20 minutes is an important part. Like a lot of companies in Silicon Valley, ping pong tables, video games, and a sports bar lounge with beanbag chairs are part of our, our architecture, if you will. But again, I think the brightness, the grittiness of this work environment has really inspired people very much. I will also say, for those of you in the United States familiar with the term swag, the other thing I completely underestimated about millennials is how much they love swag. So we have t-shirts and hoodies and hats and water bottles and a number of other things which all add up to a stickiness between our people and the company. One of the statistics I came across in my first year here was in the agency world in particular. It was this tendency that employees might decide within their first 30 days whether or not the industry, let alone the company, are right for them. So we went out and we designed something we called the perfect first week. A lot of these things are pretty intuitive and you might do them in your own company, like making sure that they have mentors and making sure that people fill out all their tax forms on the first day and that they have a lunch with their team. All those things are pretty basic. But one of the additions, remember, this is the group that's grown up with social media. This is the group that grew up with American Idol and The Voice and all this openly and outward projection of themselves on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. So we created this Meet Our Newest Edition. It feels almost like a Facebook post, but it also has these quirky little questions that everybody who comes in about a day or two before they walk in the doors, we publish this so that familiarization about the employee starts right away. I talked earlier about recognition. We give a lot of that verbally, but we also created a kudos wall. It's called the Oh Yeah Kudos Wall, as you can see, and there's a young lady who's literally almost like, clothesline, hanging up her kudos and appreciation for one of her colleagues. We take it down every week and we refresh it. That has really, I think, created a camaraderie and esprit de corps and making people recognize that I'm respected and I'm being recognized. Our website, if you ever go on out to ohpartners.com, because of the limitations of the webcast, I can't do justice to it. But like a lot of companies, we feature our people on our website with their names, but we also turn these into GIFs. So what you have is if your mouse were to hover over Marco or Lily or Leo, you'll see them in 3 or 4 different poses. And it creates a fun and familiar way And then you can see that this is an appropriate little cross section of what a millennial looks like. And again, when you think about how they have grown up with selfies and the prevalence of those, this little I guess innovation on our part has made people feel a real sense of community, and those daytime roommates come to life this way. We've also taken a holistic approach overall to organizational health, and we have consciously stimulated the mind, the body, and the soul, because we believe that that is important for this group. One of the things that you probably have all learned yourself, and with the prevalence of online universities and snackable size webcasts and TED Talks, etc., we've rolled out OHU, and we've taken a content and repackaged it in bite-size portions for our employees to download at any time. It's on their time, wherever they are, on any platform, whether it be their phone or their desktop or a tablet. And we encourage them to put in an hour, almost like continuing education credits, an hour of learning per month in this curriculum, and it goes towards their bonus. OH Motivate, or OM, is a little bit of a play on words. We created a health and wellness initiative that started with encouraging people to drink a proper amount of water per day. We live in a desert community, so we were measuring people's water intake to create healthy habits. We did biometric screening. 88% in the first year volunteered for the biometric. This past year it was 95%. We take that biometric data not to share the individual, but we take a look at the broad cross-section of that data to find out what habits might be even destructive and how can we work around it. We've now brought in health coaches and yoga coaches into the office. The OH Cares in the lower left-hand corner, that is literally our committee, and we now give a day of service, and actually we'll probably end up doing 5 days of service this year. And it really motivates people and gives these millennials that have this greater sense of purpose and making a difference in the world, it gives them an outlet to pursue it while they're employed by us. And like a lot of companies, we have our sports teams too. One of the things that I found most shocking, and I will credit KPMG for this, but I quote from a document that came out in 2017. Millennials are the first generation to use the word fun to describe their dream job. They really embody the sentiment that life is too short to be stuck in a dead-end job. And so I believe that paramount to our success has been the fact that we allow people, we bake fun into the way we operate every day. The picture on the left is obviously a Halloween party with a small cross-section of the employees that were willing to go out and to get the picture taken by a drone. And whether it's bowling tournaments or celebrating success in the conference room, we try to promote that fun and collaboration on a regular basis. Don't make it episodic, make it core to your, the way you operate your company. So I'm kind of heading down the home stretch. I've only got a few slides that I want to try to bring it all home, and then I know that Drew is going to open it up for questions that you may have had along this brief journey. But I'd like to say that I'm sure there's more, but the 8 steps that we've identified that has led to a more engaged millennial workforce are as follows. And again, all of us who worked at Procter know the importance of envision and energize and enable and the 3 E's leadership model. Well, I'm happy to say that those of us who have adopted that and continue to have a participative leadership style, you can energize the teams. You can work in a company where millennials will rally and be incredibly engaged. I think, again, P&G was wonderful with their purpose, value, and principles, and I'm happy to say that those of you who work in companies that remain that purpose focused and that they have a clear business mission. If it's an entrepreneurial company, let the millennials help shape that purpose and and that focus and that mission. The third, and the word in red is so critical here. It's one thing to just have your core values and your company values and put them on a website, but if you can bring them to life authentically all the time. We measure our employees on performance reviews based on their adherence to the core values. So it's 1/3 of the weighting of their review will come through the ability to live and practice those core values authentically. I can't emphasize enough, while we all thought that Proctor had a strong culture, I think today it all starts with culture. It has to create a passion-filled work culture. Otherwise, you're going to see people essentially falling into that category of 70% or more not being engaged, not being motivated, not giving their best effort. The final 4, as I mentioned a minute ago, develop layers of engagement. Keep it fresh, keep it fun. One of the things that I literally just heard in another presentation a few weeks ago really resonated with me. It should be obvious in a culture where social media has become so prevalent. Don't view socialization in the workplace as a distraction that you try to say, go back to your cubes or go back to your desks. You're getting too loud. You're getting too obnoxious. See it as a stimulus that builds actually stronger tribes. I can almost measure every day the amount of noise that starts to build up at 3 and 4 and 5. These guys who've been working hard all day with their headphones on and maybe music blasting into their headsets are now starting to they want a little bit of energy, and they're moving around into different circles. It's not about the distraction. They'll work later and freely. They just need that socialization to keep them, feeling great. Offer jobs and careers that make a difference. I think that we try to do a very good job of telling people every Monday morning. We remind people of our purpose is to elevate the world through creative problem solving. That's our purpose. And so we then try to use points throughout the day and throughout the week that shows how our agency on behalf of our clients are making a difference in the world, whether it's helping the Department of Health Services reduce opioid epidemic or helping people with smoking cessation programs. We try to make sure people understand that the work we do does make a difference and that their jobs and their careers can make a difference too. Foster workmates as second family. That whole concept of daytime roommates has really resonated with us. View the organization as a dynamic network of teams. And we have creative teams, but we also move the members of that team and reintroduce different combinations of teams with different clients so that we can keep that energy and that collaboration, if you will, extremely high. And then lastly, yes, you probably do need to be creative with your perks, your benefits, and in your forms of recognition. It may be a little bit more than other generations have needed, but I can assure you that when you do, great things can happen. And so with that, I obviously want to thank all of you for listening, but I now know that Drew may want to take over control and answer or ask me questions that you have had.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have any questions now based on what Brad has presented, again, in the right side box, you are welcome to share those questions, and we'll share those out to the group. So one of the questions coming in, Brad, I think is kind of the idea of, if you to have one kind of starting place in a place that doesn't have very many resources and, maybe is it not part of the top-down culture of some of these things that you talk about, anything to do from like a team level that isn't necessarily resource intensive to start to engage millennials on your team, let alone like as a strategic corporate initiative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if the question is really, how to get started on a lean budget, we had to do that. And I think one of the things that I can't emphasize enough is, like most generations, this generation wants to be heard. They want, whether you do a survey monkey, which we did inexpensively to try to get a feeling from employees with an anonymity guaranteed. How are they feeling? What's working? What's not working? I really think that that was a critical starting point to create a conversation. We probably could have done it around a lunch table, and we could have done it qualitatively, but I think we gave them a little hope of anonymity. And when there wasn't anything punitive, in fact, when we acted on that survey data to increase the number of days of PTO, to offer time of more work-life balance, and improve how we work and what we work on, that empowered them, and that got the conversation going. So you can start this re-energizing and re-engaging with virtually no money down.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you mentioned, especially on surveys. I remember with at P&G, sometimes we would do surveys, and then the important part is following up and saying, hey, because you guys said this in the survey, here are the changes that we're making, so that they recognize that they were heard and not just making changes in a vacuum based on the survey data, letting them know that it came from that, because that encourages filling out things in the future as well. Great question. There's a couple questions kind of around this idea that ask the question, how do you balance some of these quote unquote new ideas with still managing, Gen X or baby boomers and what they like or what they appreciate?
That's a great question. And maybe it's been easier for me because the boomers and the Gen Xers in our company are in the minority, not the majority. And we've said that the advertising business is not really a career, it's really a lifestyle. And so, yeah, we might get in early, we may stay late, we may have to do things on weekends, but a lot of companies have that. And what we've been able is, I think that all of the older people, myself included, got caught up in the enthusiasm and the excitement, not just of technology and social media, but how these kids live, work, and play. And I think, we had nobody who is a baby boomer voluntarily leave this enterprise, but we were able to. There were those people who we thought were bad fits, and they were going to be kind of disgruntled, and we just asked them, like in the Good to Great book, get the people off the bus that don't want to be there. And that has just opened up this culture so that there's this blending. And like I found in Japan, where employees tend to revere not just hierarchy, but the elder citizens, and know that they are senseis and our teachers. I see some of that here too, because this group, despite the fact that they tend to want to be job hoppers, they can turn to those who are 40, 45, and 50, and they want to learn from them. And so I think that the older people get that opportunity to be that mentor, that coach, and that they see real, sincere interest by those who are younger. And so it becomes more seamlessly blended. Everybody understands their role. So I think that that's been part of the success.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I also think that a lot of the things that millennials ask for, meaningful work, flexible work life, all that kind of stuff, are things that the older generations are wait, I want that too, right?
Yes.
So as you engage them, most of the things don't necessarily turn off the other generations. You spoke to a little bit there, this idea of job hopping. And so one of the questions is around that idea of, what some other people have experienced or seen is that you see less and less people with, like, say, 10 plus years at a company. Instead, they're more 2 to 3 before moving around. So the question is, what's your opinion about that change? Are you seeing that by engaging them, that the retention is longer? Or is it still just a thing that they're going to hop around, and is something that we just have to accept around the millennial generation?
Great question. And of course, we're pretty early into this funnel in the 2.5 years, but as I said, the retention has gone up markedly. But like what Proctor, I think, did well, and what we've tried to adopt here, we take those what counts factors, we take those core values, we do a performance review. So we've just come through performance reviews in the month of August. We did calibration sessions. People are getting those salary increases. They're seeing that their salary increases are in fact tied to their performance over the past 12 months. We've rolled out an incentive compensation program. We've just printed up for the first time ever this scorecard that shows our investments in those. I know that P&G and other companies that I worked in created those scorecards, not just looking at the cash compensation, but we rolled out a 401k. 92% of employees joined the 401k with a company match. So we show all of this in a tabular form, and people are starting to say, wow, the company is really investing. One of the things, and to those of you who asked the question about how do you get that retention, I don't think that every company would have this option, but we boldly announced in June, and it's called OH8. Any employee who hits 8 years of service to the company will get a 30-day paid sabbatical on top of the 3 weeks, or by then almost 4 weeks of vacation that they will get. I can't tell you how many people enthusiastically responded to that type of commitment. But again, by putting it out there at 8 years, we want you to be here, and we're going to continue to move your career. Being in a high growth company, as we have been, in 2017, we grew at 133%. This year, it's about 70%. People can naturally see, and in fact, I asked a question in a small survey in the spring of 2017 when I saw those great engagement data. I went back and asked a question. Do you see a strong correlation between your personal and professional growth in the companies? And 96% of people agreed with that. I knew if we could continue to grow our top line, people would believe that they would grow theirs. And we've seen a lot of that resonate with people, and I think that they're going to stick around. I don't think they're going to job hop.
Yeah, I think that's great. And incentivizing and giving specific kind of language around years, not only to say that there's a benefit that you gain from being here 8 years, but also that we hope that you are, that we see that you can be here in 8 years, or that we want you to be here. Along those lines, so I'll ask two last questions, just for the sake of time. So the next one is around those lines of any tips on recruiting millennials?
Oh, that's a great question. I brought in, we were using, headhunters, etc. But we've kind of, in the last 12 to 15 months, we've really changed things up. First of all, like a lot of companies, we started with an intern program at local universities, 10 to 12. We had very creative intern programs that ended in capstone projects that then those students, as they returned to their universities, might post on their social media, and as did we, posted on our corporate. So that was one start. Second, we brought in someone for talent management and culture, and we put them on staff. We didn't even have an HR department, honestly, 2 years ago, and now we do. But this person is particularly adept in using LinkedIn, in using Indeed, and other outreach and building that database. I think that it helps when your website is working hard for you and begins to tell a story of your culture, and those awards and recognition that we've been getting in the industry certainly perpetuate it. An article broke yesterday, and it says Brad Casper leads a culture of fun. That happens to be 2 days before a most admired award will drop. So we're synchronizing all these different touch points. Our company, our employees don't know yet, but we're picking up 13 PR awards at this ceremony on the 27th, and we've already been told we're agency of the year. Back in February, we won a lot of awards, Addy Awards, 2x more than any agency in history. So we've created that preferred corporate brand, and now we find millennials racing to us. but it is all about managing the message.
Yeah, I think that's great. And for the people on the call, don't email any of the people that you know at AOH Partners and reveal the news. Let them find that out as that comes out. So thank you for sharing that with us. So last question before we kind of wrap here is around the ideas of how did you get leadership buy-in, or any recommendations on leadership buy-in? One, for the value in engaging millennials, and then two, did you give them any tools for the team to help them to be consistent with these values that you created, so that it wasn't just values written on a wall, but that they actually kind of lived and breathed the things that you talked about, so it did get out to the millennial group?
Like a lot of companies, we have a leadership team. It's a multifunctional leadership team with most of the classic departments present. I don't think that there was any specific training that we did. We would send a few folks off to some 4As, Advertising Association type events and seminars, but it was more the way we just practiced on a daily basis. I think people at the leadership level, they had to buy into this Monday morning magic, that there really was magic in the way that we got people together. Some people initially kind of pushed back, hey, Brad, is this really the best use of time? And I said it is, because it's not just about what's going to happen in this week or what happened last week. It's our way of literally demonstrating culture every week and on a predictable cadence. And we keep it fresh and keep it fun. So I think the buy-in came a lot easier because it was very, very organic, and we haven't been too top-down heavy. And we do have a lot of fun, and and we know that fun transcends age and level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that to me, that was one of the most interesting stats that you said, that millennials were the first generation to include fun in their ideal job, which I think speaks to the change of things. And then also as a, the self-proclaimed humor engineer that teaches organizations how to use humor to be more effective. It's a great stat that I'll be using, because it's going to help with, my whole mission is helping people to do that. That's why I was the, self-proclaimed corporate humorist at P&G, was, hey, when people have more fun, they are more engaged and they get better results. So thank you for also kind of boosting up some of the work that I'm doing. I appreciate that. So with that being said, Brad, as I start to switch kind of gears over here, any last, and I guess, I don't know if you have a last slide, sorry I took that away too soon, but any last words or any last story that you want to share with people for them, and I'll give you control back over the screen in case you want to show a last slide.
I don't have any other last slide. This is really it. But the last thought I would have for you is one. I was at a little CEO summit last night over a dinner table with a bunch of different companies and Gannett in the USA Today. And it was really interesting how some of these other CEOs were talking about millennials and the challenges that they were having. And my advice to them was as follows. Hey, listen, it's not about trying to change millennials and make them more like boomers or any other generation that's preceded them. Our job is to change our paradigms about how we value them and, frankly, utilize them. It's about how our companies fit into their lives, not just how their lives fit into our companies. And I think if we just are willing, as let's say non-millennials, to change our paradigms about them, not label them as slackers and all this other stuff that often comes with it, I think we are going to have an opportunity to just energize, mobilize, and take companies to greatness, and they'll be on the wings of the millennials who are leading it.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's a great message to end on. So, Brad, thank you again so much for joining us. A couple of quick announcements as we follow off the normal announcement is, certainly if you want updates, go to pgalums.com. You can support the foundation at pgalums.com/foundation. If you want to partner with us, consider as a sponsor, you can go to pgalums.com/sponsor. If you have any questions on joining a local chapter, starting a local chapter, upcoming local chapter events, you have a recommendation for the webinar, that kind of stuff, there will be a survey that comes out as soon as you close out that you can fill that out, or you can always email hello@pgalums.com. Brad, thank you again so much for joining us today with tremendous value of leading and engaging millennials. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Take care,
Excellent.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.